Joining me now is Mike Longmire. He is a private investigator and consultant and a retired veteran police officer. Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Amanda.
Tell me a little bit about your background, how you ended up going from law enforcement to becoming a private investigator.
Well, when I retired from the Raleigh Police Department in 2001, my plan was to go into the nonprofit arena. I had gotten a master's in nonprofit or public administration, and I went to Duke and got a certificate in nonprofit management. And 9/11 happened, and I was pulled into the private sector to work with a security consulting and investigative company based in Raleigh. And as luck would have it, I became a partner in that group for 12 or 13 years. And in 2015 or 16, decided I had had enough and moved into just opening up myself to the possibility of other investigative work. My uh, wife was a retired SBI agent who had been working for the massage board uh, to help them with complaints that might come in about inappropriate activity uh, that came to their attention. And I was asked to meet with the attorney that uh, represented the board, and we discussed a problem that they had learned about, and it was this epidemic of illegal massage businesses that had begun uh, populating communities around North Carolina, and they did not know what or how to do anything about it at that time.
When you were a police officer and later an investigator, what kinds of cases did you handle?
Well, as an officer, you responded to every 911 call, and it could be about anything from a traffic incident to a murder. So you typically did the initial investigations and sometimes the complete investigation of all of those. Uh, but I also ended up becoming an investigator and spent several years uh, working vice and narcotics activity in the city of Raleigh. Became a sergeant, a supervisor of the unit, and then eventually the captain of the investigative division. At some point, I worked, managed an organized crime drug enforcement task force that was made up of DEA, immigration, SBI, county law enforcement officers together working the greater Wake Durham County area, uh, the organized crime involving the Jamaican uh, drug activity that had moved into the area. So I had a broad range of experience.
Yeah. And so, was this an issue as an officer or an investigator that ever came across your table, or was it kind of new to you when you got involved?
Well, up until 1999, uh, the massage industry was considered an adult establishment. They were regulated as massage parlors. There was not a professional uh, designation or a board that regulated that profession until after 1999. So, I had always heard about these massage places, but they were not open storefront operations. If they were happening then, they were typically in motels or in some of the other adult entertainment locations.
And so then they become legitimate, in air quotes, with storefronts. And there's also actual massage places, spas that are legitimate. So it kind of got muddled in terms of how do you know which ones are for real and which ones are doing, operating illegally. So you get involved, I guess, with the board and start looking at this. And how big did the problem appear to you when you first learned about it?
Well, at that time, doing some background and looking at uh, research that had been done nationally by some of the uh, human trafficking organizations, it was estimated that there could be anywhere between 250 to 350 what I will call illegal or illicit massage businesses operating in North Carolina. So the first thing we did was take a look at what was done in other locations, and many states regulated the businesses and the licensees. We only, up to that point, regulated the activity of a massage therapist, not the business. So we went through a process which took a couple of years to get legislation that would enable the board to license any business that provided massage services that was not a sole proprietor business. And so, beginning in the 2021-22 time period, the board then had the authority to regulate businesses as well as the individuals who work in those businesses.
And that's an important distinction because you mentioned human trafficking, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about mostly women, sometimes men too, but mostly women who are often brought to these businesses under false pretenses. Come here, we'll give you, you'll get a great salary. We might give you a place to live. And often they're coming from other states, even other countries, and then they get trapped, by these businesses, right? And to a point where they're having to do this illegal activity, sexual activity, and they don't feel like they have a way out. So it really falls on the business owner, not the individual therapists. In many cases, this illegal activity is really being run and managed by the business owner.
That's correct. This is the illegal massage business industry is organized crime. It is a continuing criminal enterprise under North Carolina statutes, but nationally it's considered organized criminal activity. It is sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking, all rolled up into one ball. Not every illegal massage business that operates in North Carolina is involved in human trafficking or sex trafficking. Sometimes it's simply labor trafficking. Take a look at the malls in North Carolina. If you go to most any mall, you will find a business that provides massage services or massage regulated services. Uh, they typically do not have licensed massage therapists working there. They are often people who uh, are not in our country legally, or they are unable to find other uh, work. And so they work in these massage establishments that are unlicensed and provide what would be a legitimate massage. They are typically not involved in any of the other illicit activities, but the operators of those businesses are profiting from the labor of those unlicensed therapists. The
Who may
unlike
not be making they may not even be making a living wage
right, many
in
times
most
they're not.
cases.
They're paid as I'll call them contractors, where they get so much per massage, or they get all or a portion of the tip. But often it's unreported income, and the businesses profit from the labor of the individuals.
I know when we talked about this off camera a couple weeks ago, you mentioned that, an important part of this is undercover work, right? And so part of that is your partnerships with law enforcement. And part of that are some of the things you do. And you talked to me, I don't know if you can share about the case where you had an operator who wanted to open an illegal business. And so you met with her under the auspices of helping her do that so that you could see, what her intentions were.
Sure. It's not uncommon in the illegal massage industry for the owner operators to try to influence regulators, whether they be myself, maybe the building inspector that was involved in helping get any kind of permit for the space that they're building out, other code enforcement people, and law enforcement. Anybody who might interfere with that business operation is on occasion subject to being solicited to accept a bribe. It happens often. And those bribes may not always be in the form of money. I'm aware of a case at a mall where the security staff at the mall was given free massages to let them know if I was around. So, it's sometimes somewhat discreet, but I have been offered, a guy threw $10,000 in cash into the front seat of my car one day in Cary. And I asked him, I said, what is that for? I have been talking with him about the need for him to obtain the appropriate establishment licenses for the businesses that he was trying to open. And he was obviously not wanting to do that. I left the interview, walked to my car, he followed me. And as I opened my car door, he threw an envelope with $10,000. And I said, what do you want me to do? What is that? And he says, that's yours. I want you to do nothing. That's what I want.
In other words, don't say that they're not following the proper steps.
Leave me alone. Yeah.
And obviously, you're in the private sector. You're working for the state on this, but you're in the private sector. How do you work with law enforcement on this? I mean, do you bring them in at a certain point?
Yeah. Well, in the case of throwing the money into my car, I am not a public official. So his effort to bribe me does not fall within the statutes because I'm not a public official. It would be a crime for me to accept that money because that would be extortion for me to accept the money in return for not messing with him. So I always report those things to law enforcement, and on occasion, and on 3 or 4 occasions that I'm involved with, they have become a part of the investigation where I tell the person who solicited me, I can help you if it's a board issue, but if it goes to law enforcement, they may or may not contact me. And on occasion, they will ask me if I have a friend in law enforcement. And I typically find one and introduce them to those people, and they solicit and bribe the public official.
And then that becomes a crime. Can you, I know you can't talk about all of your cases because some of them are ongoing and there's privacy issues, but can you tell us just a little bit about some of the cases you've handled and the outcomes?
Sure. I think there was one recently in the local media in the Raleigh area about one in the town of Pittsburgh. The law enforcement people there became concerned about a location that we had identified, and we worked along with law enforcement in exposing what was taking place at that business. And they were able to execute a search warrant recently identified all of the people involved, have made criminal charges on the property, or excuse me, the operator of the business, the person who leased the space and was uh, profiting from that activity. Uh, and
What do
that's an
you
ongoing case right now.
what do you I mean, what are some of the worst things you've seen that when it comes to especially women who are being trafficked
Yeah,
and victimized?
right. I've been in literally hundreds of these places across the state, and I find in 95% of the cases, at least, that the women would rather not be there, but they have no opportunity to work in other legitimate businesses. Uh, they are uh, expected to provide sexual services. Not all of them want to do that, but they have no other options. Up until this past year in North Carolina, we had no referral service that would be a rescue group that was culturally capable of handling the needs of these victims, the special victims in the illegal massage industry. Uh, Law enforcement often treated them as prostitutes rather than victims. Um, there are a lot of cultural uh, issues in investigating those types of prostitution activities.
Because there's a lot of fear
Yeah,
of the women to testify, right, against some of these owners because they're afraid of retribution.
right. And they're afraid of law enforcement. They come here from a society typically where law enforcement is not their friend. Law enforcement is part of the government and part of the suppression activity. They are trained to be fearful of law enforcement. They are trained to believe that we are all corruptible because in their communities and society, law enforcement is corruptible. There's always the above the table and the below the table activity that goes on.
And you have not just the cultural barrier, I'm sure you have the a language barrier in some cases, and then a gender barrier because in other cultures, women, maybe don't have the same rights that we do in the United States. And so there's a lot of things that kind of mix together.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go on. There's a big dynamic that takes place. Uh, we try and identify during our, I'll call them inspections of the locations, which of the women who are working there are the workers and who is the boss. There's always someone who oversees the activity of those women. And we get them separated. We try and get the workers in one place and the owner operator in another place. And again, recently we've been able to team up with a group called Hope for Justice. And they are a human trafficking uh, nonprofit that, uh, for the first time in the 12 or 13 years that I've been working on these matters, actually has a process in which they can help the victims. Although there are no rescue services here in North Carolina, Hope for Justice will help transport and any person who declares themselves to be a victim or who wants to escape and go somewhere else but has no way to do it. In the recent case of Pittsburgh, they helped two of the people there leave the state. One may be involved in uh, getting some rescue services at a location in Chicago.
Do you think there is a shift in mindset in terms of these women again, mostly women, being victims versus committing a crime?
Uh, there's a shift, but it's not a big shift. Um, because they will not declare themselves as victims, they're treated as suspects, and that's in many cases the truth of the matter. Uh, there is a shift. It's a slow shift. Um, we emphasize and encourage law enforcement to look at the illegal massage businesses that operate in their communities as organized criminal enterprises, and that the workers are victims of either sex, labor, or human trafficking. And there's not a big difference between the three. Human trafficking, there's a big hurdle to get over, and that is demonstrating the elements of force, fraud, or coercion. And the victims in the human trafficking that goes on in the illegal massage industry are very, very reluctant to provide that information. They usually, a human trafficking case involves a victim who will testify, somebody who comes forward. When there is no victim that will testify, you have to base your case on other evidence. The age of the person. If a 13-year-old girl gets caught in a motel being pimped by a gangbanger, that's human trafficking simply because of her age. She doesn't even have to testify. It doesn't matter what she says, as long as the law enforcement can prove that she was engaged in some kind of prostitution, that the pimp was benefiting. It's human trafficking.
But it's more complicated when you're dealing with adults, I would imagine. And you mentioned earlier that this is organized crime. I mean, these massage parlors go hand in hand with other crimes, right? Money laundering, often the drug trade. I mean, it's not just one thing.
Yeah. Well, the human trafficking and the sex trafficking, prostitution that takes place in the illegal massage businesses is the primary source of income for those organized criminal enterprises. The trafficking of the girls who provide the illegal services is where the profit comes from. Now, there are also other concerns about criminal activity, both those crimes that victimize the girls further. They're often subject to rape. They don't always want to have sexual intercourse. They may want or may be willing to provide other services. And sometimes they are physically forced to do the things they don't want to do. They don't, who are they going to call? The police? No. They're often robbed. They have lots of cash money. They have their tips, and then the business has the money that comes in from the customers. Many times these places are robbed. It goes unreported.
Right, because they're not going to call the police when they have an illegal business. And it occurs to me that the reason anything exists is because of demand, right? So as long as there's demand, activity like this is going to go on. Do you ever prosecute customers or do you try to turn them into witnesses?
Well, in North Carolina now, it is a felony for a man to solicit a woman for prostitution. It's still a misdemeanor for a female to engage in prostitution, uh, although that is,
Rarely invoked.
yeah, it's kind of where things happen. The the people that go into the massage businesses, uh, we encourage law enforcement through a few techniques and things. We discourage any kind of undercover activity that exposes a police officer or a undercover operative to sexual activity by the therapist. That is, it is wrong.
It's kind of like the olden days
Yeah,
that
in
might
the
have
old days,
passed
you'd
muster, but
send a
not now.
cop into the business. They'd ask for a massage. They get in, and there's this thing about entrapment.
Right.
There's always this thing. Well, who asked for the sex? Was it the cop or was it the girl? You play that game back and forth. In the illegal massage industry, the assumption is that if a man goes into that business, 99 out of 100 times, they are going in there for the purpose of prostitution. There is no discussion that takes place, often because the people that you're getting the massage from can't speak English. So the discussion is typically nonverbal. And
It's an
I'll leave it
assumption,
at that.
right? It's an assumption that's made. Is this a needle in a haystack situation? I mean, obviously, you can close one at a time, and I know a lot of them reopen in other locations.
Yeah, a needle in a haystack kind of suggests that they're hard to find. They're not. They're easy to find. Uh, it's what you do with the needle when you find it. Do you let it stay in the haystack so that it causes somebody else a problem if they reach in? So the real issue is uh, how do we identify and hold accountable all of the people that are profiting from the illegal massage industry? And those are often the property owners, the landlords, and property managers who are anxious to rent the space. You find most of these places in what I would call second or third generation shopping center type environments that are uh, the property managers and owners are aggressively trying to lease the space, the
And
empty.
so it's like a don't ask, don't tell situation where they probably know what's going on, but they really don't want to know as long as you're paying the rent.
Right. And once they find out, they're not always anxious to close. They always go, well, it, it's only an illegal massage business. We have not, if law enforcement is not involved and demonstrating the prostitution or other criminal activity, then the property owner says, well, it's not our problem, it's the board's problem. If they don't have a license, you do whatever you need to do, but they're not violating our lease.
What should people do if they live in a town and they see a business they think is operating illegally? Who should they report that to?
Yeah. Well, I think that the important part of that question is that it is not simply a law enforcement issue. The illicit massage industry can only be eradicated in a community if the community is outraged about the fact that it exists. We get calls often from people who tell us about places that we already know about, uh, and we encourage them to contact law enforcement. I contact law enforcement. It this is community policing, is kind of the concept that will cause these businesses to want to go somewhere else, to leave North Carolina. Uh, we we're not going to stop prostitution. That I mean, it's what they call it, the oldest profession. There will be prostitution, but it doesn't need to be in our communities as organized criminal activity. And that's what these illegal massage businesses are. Some locations, they are set up and they become a national security issue. Uh, the Homeland Security has recently identified the illegal massage industry as a national security threat. Uh, we know for a fact that in and around many of our military installations, these businesses exist. They make efforts to elicit information about, say, troop movements from young soldiers who may go in to one of these places.
And then there's always the opportunity to blackmail someone too if they're worried about
Exactly.
their reputation.
There's extortion, uh, and again, it is not simply prostitution. It's not. These are not businesses that are set up to provide massage services. They are set up.
It's many layered.
Yeah.
It's many layered. And I think as a woman, what and a mother, what I'm the most concerned about is, women who are being victimized. Mike, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us. Anything that I missed?
Uh, well, just to give you an example of the the problem and the victimization. Um, I was involved in an investigation of a location that had operated for quite some time in a community, and eventually the police got involved in it, and we were able to uh, execute. They were able to execute a search warrant, and they gathered up the three girls that were working there. One was the mama san, or the person in charge, and they were interviewing one of the two workers, and they had an interpreter who was helping with the interview. And so the questions were like three, the cop would ask a question, the interpreter would repeat it, the answer would be repeated, and so it was kind of back and forth. The officer, the girl was reluctant to provide any information. She was scared. She was not being forthcoming. So the officer said something to the interpreter. Well, tell her we've been watching this place for over 6 months, and we know exactly what's been going on, and she better, come out and confess to and help us out, more or less was the. So the interpreter said that to the girl, and the girl started crying. Well, the cop thought, well, I've broken her. Now she's going to talk to me. And she said something, and the interpreter said, well, the cop said, what did she say? And the interpreter said, well, she will never tell you anything because you knew that she was in that business for 6 months, and you let her stay there and do all those terrible things. And now you want her to help you. She's not going to help you. So for 6 months, she felt that she had suffered, and you had the chance to come in 6 months
And there
ago.
was nobody to help.
Nobody to help her.
That's really heartbreaking.
We have gone into places and found similar. We have no rescue. Up until recently, there was no hope for justice, rescue opportunity. So we would help the girls pack their luggage, and we'd call an Uber for them, or we took them to to a safe place, and they left the area, and then they would send us back a text and thank us for helping them leave. But there's no help for them in North Carolina.
That's really, hopefully that will change, especially with awareness and somebody like you who's out there, leading the charge in a very important issue that is not just in North Carolina, but the entire country.
Oh, yeah. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's 9 to 11,000 of these places scattered about in plain view in our communities. They're moving into hotels and motels now. They're moving into residential areas, Airbnbs, and apartment complexes, uh, and setting up shop in those places. Uh, Maybe because the exposure now in the uh, traditional mall shopping center environments are being exposed.
There's more awareness. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time and your expertise.